Okay, let's be frank, we've all been there. Right when it's time to sit down and do the work, that's exactly when your brain comes up with at least 35 cool things you'd rather be doing instead. You would literally do everything but what you're supposed to be doing. But why is that? Why does that happen? Well, it's what I call brain inertia. The mere act of getting started with doing any task requires effort. You inevitably have to win the initial resistance. Getting started feels like pushing a giant rock. Before it starts rolling, you've got to get it moving, and that requires a ton of work. Your brain works just like that rock. When you sit down and get to work, it's really hard to get started. Your brain requires a significant push before it gets going. Most of the times, that initial inertia is caused by the fact that you simply don't know where to get started. Right before you sit, chances are you were doing completely unrelated stuff. Where was I? What was I doing? What was this all about? Where am I supposed to start? These are the kinds of questions your brain needs to answer before it gets going. But the context switch required to answer those questions is quite demanding for your brain. That's why it's so hard to get going. So what do we do? How do we fix that? Well, let's use the Hemingway method. Referring to writing, Hemingway famously said, "I always stopped when I knew what was going to happen next. That way I could be sure of going on the next day." Everybody thinks the problem with procrastination lays in the way you approach a working session, while the real issue is rather in the way you finish the previous one. We all think we should end the working session once we've done with the task, but Hemingway did not agree with that. Quite the opposite. He thought that if you know what comes next, you don't have trouble starting again the next day, so he never finished a writing session with a full stop. He always left the door open for the next thing to come. Okay, I know not all of us do writing for a living, but the same principle can be applied everywhere. As you leave work or finish studying, always leave a thread open so that the next day you can catch it and get going right away. Always know what's the next thing you should be doing next time you get work, so you don't have to think. Ideally, before you actually get work, you should have at least a rough idea of what are the steps required to get to your goal. The principle is that once you have this rough plan laid out, then it's all about execution. You can trust the process. The steps will bring you to the goal. Don't worry too much if the steps are not 100% accurate. You can adjust them as you go. Use them as an approximate roadmap to the target. But one thing, make sure the first few things you do as you start working are simple and straightforward. Don't start from tasks requiring deep strategic creative thinking. Leave those for later when your brain has already gained momentum. The first things you do should be only about execution. Creative and strategic thinking require much more effort than execution, so save them for later. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you are into ways of fighting procrastination, you should check this other video I made. You won't regret it. See you there. Thanks for watching. Bye.